Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. I had never felt so out of place. There I was, sitting at a makeshift table by the dessert station at my father's 70th birthday party. The table was cluttered with plates of untouched pastries and half-drunk glasses of champagne. It wasn't exactly a coveted spot, but that's where I ended up, far from the action, wedged between the dessert table and the door to the kitchen. The real celebration was happening at the head table, where my father, Drs. Edward Carter, sat with his favorite children, my brother Sebastian, the prestigious surgeon, and Lila, the celebrated legal scholar. I watched as they held court, basking in the attention of a room full of people. Every word they spoke was met with admiration. Every story they told made people laugh. Meanwhile, I sat there with my plate of untouched appetizers, pretending to enjoy the small talk with the few relatives who bothered to swing by. Everyone had always praised me for being the creative one, but I was tired of that label. My creativity didn't matter here, not when it came to the elite world my family operated in. "You look great, Amara," Aunt Linda said, giving me a thin smile as she dropped a napkin next to me. "Thanks," I muttered. It wasn't a real compliment, I could tell. As my family continued their conversation across the room, I picked at my food, my mind drifting. It was so typical of them, so easy for them to be seen as successful, respected, admired. But here I was, pushing myself to the edge of the room, watching them from afar. They had no idea what I had accomplished. They never did. I ran one of the most successful tech startups in the city. I had just secured a major deal that would push us into new territories. But none of them cared. It wasn't even on their radar. I was the outsider in a family of doctors, lawyers, and scholars, and they didn't even know the first thing about what I had done. My brother Sebastian made a joke across the table, and everyone laughed. "You're so funny, Seb," my sister Lila said, her voice dripping with adoration. They all thought it was cute, the way he acted like a surgeon god, the way he made everything seem so effortless. My phone buzzed quietly in my lap, and I glanced down at the screen. It was an encrypted message from one of my team members confirming that a huge deal had closed. The email didn't give me the thrill it used to. I had expected it, but the fact that I was sitting here, ignored by my family, made the accomplishment feel so insignificant. I felt my jaw clench. There was nothing they would ever understand. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a doctor. I didn't have a real job in their eyes. To them, I was just the creative one, a phase they never took seriously. "Amara, are you all right?" my mother asked, leaning over from her seat at the head table, giving me an obligatory smile. I swallowed my irritation. "Yeah, just fine." She didn't seem to notice the bitterness in my voice. She patted my arm and then returned to the conversation about Lila's latest legal case, completely oblivious to the fact that I had just secured a multi-million-dollar deal that would change the industry. I checked my phone again. Another confirmation message came in, this time from one of our investors. They were thrilled with the results. I smiled despite myself, but it was a hollow feeling. Nobody here, not even my mother, knew the sacrifices I had made. The sleepless nights, the constant pressure, the people I had helped, the lives I had changed. All of it, none of it mattered to them. Sebastian's laugh boomed through the air, and I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. My phone buzzed once again, a final confirmation of my deal. The room felt suffocating, like a cage. I needed out. Dinner had barely started when the conversation shifted toward me. I tried to ignore it, hoping the focus would stay on the food, the wine, anything but me. But of course, it didn't. "So, Amara," my cousin Jason said, leaning across the table with a grin, "I was just telling everyone about that app you made, right? What was it again? The one for mental health? That's a pretty cool thing." I wanted to smile, to nod along, to explain how my app wasn't just some thing, but a groundbreaking project that had helped millions of people. But all I could muster was a tight-lipped smile. "It's called MindFlow," I said, the name slipping out like it always did when people didn't care enough to ask. "It's a tech-based app for managing anxiety and mental health." "It's doing well," Jason raised an eyebrow, clearly uninterested but trying to sound impressed. "Right, well, it's good to know you're doing something with all that creativity. But, creative things aren't always stable, huh?" It's just a bit of a gamble, right? My heart tightened. That was Jason's idea of a compliment. A backhanded jab, wrapped in a thin layer of concern. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't gambling. I wasn't some artist living on a hope and a prayer. But I didn't. Because it wasn't worth it. Yeah, I said instead, voice flat. I guess you could say that. Lila, who had been watching this exchange with her usual detached air, joined in. You're so good at those creative things, Amara, she said, her words careful, like she was choosing them to placate me. But you've got to think about your future too, right? A solid career path, something steady. She wasn't wrong. I had been thinking about that future. About how tired I was of living in the shadows of their steady careers, their glossy professions. But what bothered me was how little they understood about my work, how they only saw the instability and not the results. They didn't see the people I helped. They didn't know the hours I spent debugging, working around the clock to make my company a success. They didn't see the countless sleepless nights, the sacrifices. They just saw a creative phase. Thanks, I said, forcing the words through my teeth, trying to keep the bitterness from boiling over. Lila gave me a smile that felt like it was just for show, the kind of smile she probably saved for interactions like this, when she had to be the polite, polished lawyer. You should be proud of what you're doing. It's, different, she said, clearly still struggling to understand it. But maybe now you can think about something a little more long-term, something more prestigious? Prestigious, I repeated, my mind racing. Was that what they really thought of me? Just a little side project, something different that could never be as important as their careers. I didn't say anything else, too afraid I might say something I would regret. Instead, I let the conversation slip back to the wedding details, to the guests they'd invited, to Lila's latest case. They moved on quickly, as they always did when they didn't have to talk about me. And just like that, the divide between me and them grew a little wider, a little deeper. Every comment, every look, every word they chose to speak around me only reinforced what I already knew. No matter how successful I became, I was still the odd one out in this family. As I ate my food, trying to force myself to enjoy the meal, I glanced at my phone again. Another message popped up, this time from one of my investors. The deal was closing faster than expected, and the results were even better than predicted. My company was on the cusp of something huge, but I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone. They wouldn't understand. They never did. And for the first time, I wondered how much longer I could keep pretending that their opinions, their dismissive words, didn't matter to me. How much longer could I stay at this table, trapped in a role that didn't fit me, in a family that never truly saw me? Amara, my brother Sebastian called from across the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. You doing okay over there? You look a little off. I forced a smile. I'm fine, just thinking. Sebastian shot me a look, then turned back to the conversation, his attention already somewhere else. My father, too, was absorbed in a discussion about a history project he was working on with Lila. It was as though I wasn't even there. I wasn't sure when I had become invisible to them, but I was sure of one thing. I was done trying to get their approval. That was the last straw. I didn't belong here, not in this room, not in this family. And it was time to stop pretending that I did. I slipped away from the table quietly, my heart pounding as I made my way toward the hallway. The sound of laughter and conversation from the dining room faded as I stepped into the quiet, dimly lit corridor. I needed a moment to breathe, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of judgment and indifference. The hallway was lined with framed family photos, snapshots of moments I didn't belong in. I passed them without looking, feeling like a ghost in my own family's history. I headed toward the restrooms, but instead of going inside, I leaned against the cool wall just outside, trying to calm the storm swirling in my chest. I pulled out my phone again. Another message. This one was from my assistant, confirming flight details for an upcoming business trip I had scheduled. The CEO, Adrienne Vale, was waiting for me in the lobby. I smiled, though it wasn't out of joy. It was relief. There it was, the future. The thing my family would never understand. They still thought I was chasing some whimsical dream, but they didn't see the reality I had built. My company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. My app was used by millions of people, and that was something that mattered more than anything they'd ever accomplished in their careers. But they didn't care. They wouldn't even try to understand. I leaned my head back against the wall, staring at the ceiling as I remembered the early days. The sleepless nights, the grind of turning an idea into a product. My mental health app, originally just something I created to cope with my own anxiety, had grown into something much bigger. It was my baby, my legacy. And yet, my family would never recognize it as anything more than a phase. It hurt more than I cared to admit. I wasn't asking for their validation. I had stopped needing that a long time ago. But I couldn't help the anger that bubbled up inside me. Every congratulatory smile, every comment that sounded more like a veiled insult. It all cut deeper than they would ever know. I felt the vibration of my phone again, and when I glanced at it, I saw another message from my company. This one was from a lead investor confirming the final paperwork for the deal had gone through. The funds were secured. We were moving forward. My mind raced, the adrenaline of success surging through me. But there, in that quiet moment, I felt the emptiness of my family's absence in this part of my life. They had no idea what I was capable of, and that was fine. I didn't need them to. But it was hard not to wish, just for a second, that someone, just one person, would see me for who I truly was. Not the creative, unpredictable dreamer, but a woman who had built something real, something that mattered. The thought of returning to that table, where everyone was congratulating themselves for the smallest of achievements, made my stomach churn. I had already started mentally preparing my exit, the plan forming in my mind like a quiet resolve. I didn't need their approval to know that I had made it. I had already made my mark on the world, and it was time to leave behind the people who never saw it. Another message flashed on my screen, this time from Adrian. "I'm here, waiting for you." I read the words twice, letting them settle in my mind. I stood up straighter, my resolve strengthening with each passing second. This wasn't my family's world. This wasn't my place. I was ready to walk away from it all, to claim what was mine, even if it meant walking out without an explanation. I had never needed them. I never would. I took a deep breath, pocketed my phone, and turned toward the door leading out of the hall. As I walked, I passed a few of my father's colleagues, chatting animatedly. I gave them a brief, polite nod, but I didn't look back. I wasn't part of this, not anymore. As I reached the lobby, the weight of the evening's conversations and silences lifted from my shoulders. Adrienne was standing there, her presence commanding the room even in the soft lighting of the hotel lobby. She smiled when she saw me, and the tension in my chest finally loosened. "Amara," she said warmly, walking toward me, "you ready?" I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. This was my future. This was where I belonged. "Let's go," I replied. And just like that, I left behind the people who would never understand me. I was free. The final toast was underway when I returned to the ballroom, but I barely noticed. My mind was already miles away, focused on what I was about to do. My father stood at the head of the room, raising his glass, his voice deep and commanding as he spoke about his children, the ones who had always made him proud. Sebastian, with his flawless medical career. Lila, with her polished legal victories. And then, of course, me, the creative one. I could feel his words drifting over me, a vague acknowledgement that barely touched on what I had done with my life. It was all too familiar, the same old script. They would bask in the glory of their achievements, while I was left to wonder if they even cared to know about the real work I had put in. The applause that followed his speech was polite, perfunctory. My family's approval was just a formality. They didn't understand my success. They didn't see it for what it was, and they probably never would. I had long accepted that. But it didn't mean I had to keep sitting there, in the corner, feeling invisible. Just as I turned to make my way to the door, something stopped me. A car door slammed outside. The hum of conversation around me didn't change, but I could feel a shift in the atmosphere. A few seconds later, I saw Adrienne. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she entered the room, the sound of it cutting through the noise like a blade. She was tall, confident, dressed in a sleek black dress that effortlessly drew the attention of everyone around her. She moved through the crowd with purpose, her eyes already searching for me. My heart beat a little faster as she walked toward me, every step steady, every glance deliberate. Her presence was commanding. I could see the curiosity in the eyes of the guests around her as she made her way across the floor. She was a woman used to being noticed, to being in control. And as she approached me, I felt the weight of the entire room shift. People were whispering, their eyes darting back and forth, wondering who she was and why she was here. But none of them understood. None of them would ever understand what this moment meant. "Amara," Adrienne said as she reached me, her voice warm but firm. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting." I shook my head, not even trying to hide the smile that tugged at my lips. Not at all. I was just getting ready. "Good," she said, glancing around the room as if taking it all in. "Are you ready to go?" The question felt like a lifeline. The door was wide open, and beyond it, the future was waiting. A future that wasn't tied to my family's narrow expectations. A future that was mine. I turned back toward my family, sitting at the head table, oblivious to the monumental shift happening in the room. They would never know what I was about to do. They would never see the life I had built for myself, and they wouldn't need to. I nodded to Adrienne, my heart settling into a quiet resolve. Yeah, let's go. I took one last glance at the scene behind me, at the people who would always see me as the odd one, the creative phase that didn't belong. But as I walked past them, the weight of their gazes didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like freedom. Adrienne and I walked toward the door, and the crowd parted without a second thought. I knew they were all watching us, but it didn't matter. I didn't care about their approval anymore. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt the weight of years of feeling small, feeling overlooked, lifting from my shoulders. I was leaving behind a life where I wasn't truly seen, where my accomplishments were dismissed as fleeting or insignificant. I was stepping into something new, something bigger than I had ever imagined. As we got into the limo, Adrienne offered me a knowing smile. That went perfectly. I leaned back against the leather seat, my thoughts already racing ahead, planning the next steps. I didn't have to explain myself to them anymore. My future was mine to define, and no one was going to stop me. "No looking back," I said softly, the words settling in my chest like a promise. Adrienne nodded, her eyes glinting with approval. "You did exactly what you needed to do. Now it's time for the next chapter." I smiled, the corners of my lips lifting for the first time all evening. As the limo pulled away from the hotel, I looked out the window at the city lights, knowing that from this moment on, I would never again be just the creative one. I was going to be something more, something real. The limo hummed quietly as we drove through the city, the distant lights flickering like a blur outside the window. I sat back, feeling a strange peace wash over me. It was a silence I had never quite experienced before, deep, personal, and entirely my own. The noise of the party, the laughter, the fake smiles, the condescending tones, all felt so far away now. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Adrienne glanced over at me, her eyes calculating as usual. She could see the shift in my demeanor, the subtle relaxation of my posture. "You did it, Amara. You made your exit with style. It's exactly what you needed." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the passing streets. I didn't realize how much I needed it until now, I admitted. I've spent so many years trying to fit into their mold, trying to make them see me as more than just the oddball, the creative one. Adrienne's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You're a lot more than that, and it's about time you let go of the weight they've been putting on you." I turned to look at her, a hint of gratitude in my eyes. I thought I could ignore it, all the dismissive comments, the looks, the just keep doing your thing attitude they always had. But I can't. I can't keep pretending like it doesn't matter. "You don't have to anymore," Adrienne said, her voice calm and confident. "You've built something real, something they'll never understand, and that's okay. You've got a bigger world waiting for you." The words settled deep in me, settling like a warm current that pushed out the cold uncertainty I'd felt for so long. I had spent so many years feeling like an outsider in my own family, measuring my worth against their expectations. But tonight, I had stepped away from that. I had claimed my success in front of them, even though they wouldn't ever truly recognize it. And that was enough. As we drove through the city, I let the quiet fill the space between us, reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. The sleepless nights working on the app, the endless hours spent refining and building, and the overwhelming sense of self-doubt I had lived with for so long, trying to prove my worth. But now, I was done with that. I was done letting their limited perspective define me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I hesitated before pulling it out, my pulse quickening slightly. It was a text from my mom. "Amara, I just wanted to check in. Is everything okay? I've been thinking about you." I stared at the message for a moment, the words feeling hollow, detached from the reality of what I had just done. It was as if nothing had changed for her. She didn't know what I had just walked away from, what I had just let go of. She didn't understand that for the first time in years, I wasn't going to be the one to make things better for them. I felt the familiar pang of guilt tug at my chest. But then I remembered the truth of the night. I had done what I needed to do for myself, and that had to be enough. Without responding, I turned my phone face down and tucked it back into my pocket. Adrienne, sensing the moment, gave me a knowing look. "Don't let them pull you back in." I gave her a small smile, the weight of the moment sinking in. "I won't." The city lights flashed by as we headed toward the airport. The final destination of this chapter. Adrienne was right. This was my path now. The path I had forged for myself. There was no turning back. As the limo pulled up to the airport, I felt a sense of finality. This was it, the beginning of something bigger. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Adrienne stepped out first, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. I followed her, my footsteps light, my head clear. I wasn't walking away from my family, I was walking toward my future, toward the world I had built, away from their narrow view of who I was and what I could be. With Adrienne by my side, I entered the airport, my mind already racing with the possibilities that lay ahead. This was my life now, and for the first time, I didn't have to justify it to anyone. I was free. The limo ride had been quiet, but the shift inside me had been anything but. I felt lighter as I walked through the airport, the familiar hum of people rushing by, the soft beeping of security gates, and the smell of coffee and travel all around me. For the first time, I wasn't overwhelmed by the noise. Instead, I felt like I was walking through it with purpose, with control. Adrienne led the way, her sharp black heels clicking confidently against the polished floors. Her presence felt like armor, and it grounded me, reminding me that I was moving toward something bigger, something I had worked hard for. We approached a private terminal, where the elite of the business world often pass through without the inconvenience of long lines or crowded gates. As we entered the secure area, I couldn't help but notice how different it felt. Like I had just stepped into a new life, a life where I was respected, where my accomplishments mattered, and where no one ever questioned my worth. Adrienne stopped to talk to a guard at the door, and I took the moment to glance down at my phone again. It was flooded with messages, but it was the one from my brother, Sebastian, that caught my eye. "Amara, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. Call me when you can." I felt a coldness in my chest, but I quickly ignored it. I didn't need his validation, his approval, or any of their explanations. I had stepped out of that world, and it was time to move forward. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their expectations. "Are you okay?" Adrienne's voice broke through my thoughts as she turned back toward me, her gaze sharp. I smiled, the tension in my shoulders melting away. "Yeah," I said, more to myself than to her. "I'm better than okay." She nodded, her smile a little warmer now. "Good. You've earned this." We moved through the terminal, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the empty space as we passed through security with ease. We reached the private lounge, where a sleek black limo waited outside, ready to take us to the waiting jet. As we approached, I saw the door already open, the crew standing at attention, and the hum of the jet engines in the distance. Before we stepped outside, Adrienne paused. "You know, this isn't just about the business side of things," she said softly, her tone more serious now. "You made a bold move tonight. You're not just walking away from your family's expectations. You're walking toward your own future. You know that, right?" I nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. For so long, I had been fighting to prove something to my family, to show them that I was worthy of being seen. But tonight, I had realized something else. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. I was finally carving out the life I had always wanted, without apologies. "I'm ready for this," I said, my voice steady. I don't need their approval anymore. Adrienne gave me a look of approval, her expression softening. Then let's go make this happen. We stepped into the limo, and I felt a wave of excitement rush through me. The world outside was moving fast, but inside this moment, I felt like I was finally in control. As the limo pulled away from the airport, I gazed out the window at the skyline, the city lights twinkling below. It felt like everything was in motion, and I was right where I needed to be. The jet soared into the night sky, and as I looked out the window, I knew that this was just the beginning. My family might never understand, but that no longer mattered. The world was wide open, and for the first time in my life, I was going to take it on my terms. The silence between Adrienne and me was comfortable, the hum of the jet's engines the only sound in the cabin. But even in that quiet, I felt the momentum building inside me. I was moving forward, and I wasn't looking back. The jet touched down in the early hours of the morning, the city lights below blurring into a constellation of opportunities. As the engines quieted and the wheels touched the runway, I felt a sense of finality settle in my chest. The past, the family expectations, the constant need for validation, it was all behind me now. The horizon ahead was wide open, and I was ready to embrace it. Adrienne turned to me, her expression more relaxed now. The business tone that had governed our earlier conversations softened by the quiet flight. "This is where things change," she said, her voice steady but warm. I smiled, the weight of everything I had just left behind slowly lifting. "Yeah," I said, exhaling deeply. "I can feel it." We disembarked the jet, the cool air of the early morning hitting me as I stepped onto the tarmac. There was no time for hesitation, no looking back. I had made my decision, and now it was time to move forward, to live in a world where I was seen for who I truly was. The car waiting for us was sleek and black, the driver already standing by the door. Adrienne gave me a nod of reassurance as we both slid into the back seat. The ride to the harbor was quiet, and as the city passed by in a blur, I felt the familiar sense of urgency returning to me. The harbor wasn't just a place, it was a symbol, a manifestation of everything I had worked for and everything I had kept hidden from my family. It had been my personal project, my secret, my way of giving back to the young women in tech who were overlooked and underestimated, just like I had been. This was where I belonged, creating, nurturing, growing something that mattered in a world that hadn't always believed in me. When we arrived, the building loomed in front of me, a converted warehouse that once housed a forgotten library but now hummed with energy. Inside, I could hear the faint buzz of ideas being exchanged, the click of keyboards, the soft hum of creativity coming to life. As I stepped inside, the warmth of the space wrapped around me. The harbor had always been my safe haven, my quiet rebellion against the skepticism and dismissal I had faced from my family. It was a sanctuary for young women in tech, offering them the resources, mentorship, and encouragement I had never received. I walked through the open floor plan, watching as a group of young women collaborated at a work table. Their focus intense, but their energy infectious. Their enthusiasm mirrored the energy I had felt when I first started my own journey, uncertain but hungry for change. Their faces lit up as they worked, their confidence growing with every code they wrote, every idea they brought to life. A young girl, no older than 16, approached me, her eyes wide with excitement. "Are you Amara Carter?" she asked, her voice almost trembling with awe. I nodded, smiling softly. "That's me. Are you working on something?" She glanced over at her group, then back at me, her voice growing a little stronger. "Yeah, we're building an app for teens who don't trust their school counselors. We're trying to make mental health resources more accessible." I felt a lump form in my throat, a strange mixture of pride and nostalgia filling my chest. I had started with something small too, something personal, and now, to see this next generation carrying that torch, it was more than I could have ever hoped for. "That sounds amazing," I said, my voice steady but full of warmth. "I'm really proud of you. Keep going, you're doing something important." The girl's face lit up, and for a moment, I saw a reflection of my younger self, determined, passionate, and driven. She handed me a small card with her team's name on it and a smile before rushing back to her group. I watched them for a moment, a quiet satisfaction settling deep in my bones. This, I realized, was my legacy, not the acknowledgement of my family, not the validation of the life I had left behind. It was these young women, the ones who would come after me, who would push forward in a world that had often overlooked them, just as it had overlooked me. As I turned to leave the floor and head toward the back offices, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Adrienne, her expression soft but knowing. "You did this," she said simply. "You gave them this." I nodded, my heart full but steady. "They gave it to themselves," I said. "I just made sure they had the chance." We stepped into the back office, where a small team was waiting for us. As the doors closed behind me, I realized that while my family might never understand, I didn't need them to. I had built something real, something that mattered. And for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not in the world they had created, but in one of my own making. A world where success wasn't measured by others' expectations, but by the lives I had touched and the future I was creating.